On the last episode of the Keepsake box. "Do you know what happened to your mom?" she asked. The nurse told me that Mom had tried to commit suicide. I was shocked. "Why would she do that?" I asked. The nurse continued, and her words cut me like a knife. "Your mom was babbling incoherently when she arrived, but she said some things that concerned me. She said that she wanted to die because her husband was having an affair with her daughter, and he no longer wanted her. She said that she had faked a pregnancy to get his attention, but that it only made the situation worse. Your mom took a lot of pills, but there's evidence that she had been struggling with drug abuse for a while. She told me that she had started doing drugs with her husband, but once he stopped using, he started threatening to use her drug habit against her to gain custody of you and your sister. So I'll ask you again, is your stepfather abusing you?" I had been provided with a lot of information, and I had to take everything into consideration. The average person would have used that moment as their out. Telling the truth would certainly have gotten me out of Ron's grasp, but there were other factors in play. Where would I go? Back to Grandma's, with her strict rules and judgmental church? Into the system? Where would Cassidy go? What if I got sent away and Cassidy was left with Mom and Ron? What if Ron started touching Cassidy in my absence? The thought of that made me feel sick, and I started vomiting into the trash can. I apologized to the nurse and told her that I must have gotten a bug that was going around. She looked me squarely in the eyes. "Are you pregnant?" she asked. "Of course not," I exclaimed. She stood there, studying me. "Would you like to take a test?" she asked. I nodded my head to indicate that I did indeed want to take it. I knew I needed to take the test, and in my heart, I knew it would be positive. The test confirmed my worst nightmare. It was positive. I told the nurse that I was pregnant by my boyfriend and that Ron hadn't ever touched me. I was able to convince her that all was well and that she had witnessed the wild ramblings of a deranged drug addict. She gave me some literature about teen pregnancy, and I went back to Mom's room. All of the emotions that I had tried to suppress came rushing to the surface. I started crying, and I was unable to stop. I cried because Mom had tried to commit suicide. I cried because I was convinced that Mom's drug use had resulted in Cassidy being developmentally delayed. I cried because I was pregnant by Ron. I cried because Mom had known what Ron was doing all along, and she did nothing to protect me. She knew. Chapter 22, Hardship. Narrated by Shandora Warren. Music by Epidemic Sound. Mom was in the hospital for a week. It was business as usual at home. Rape, chores, and Cassidy. Mom never admitted to attempting to commit suicide, and I never asked. After hearing about her opioid-induced confession, I could barely stand to look at her. I never went back to visit her after that day. When Mom came home from the hospital, she stopped attempting to hide her drug use. Everything was out in the open, and I guess she found no need to keep up the front. Mom didn't do drugs in front of us, but she gave up the semblance of looking normal. I could tell when she was high because she was mean and belligerent. She was a completely different person. I assume Mom had initially been hiding away in her room to prevent us from noticing the change in her behavior. I guess she cared less about the appearance of it all after everything was exposed. Ron didn't hide what he was doing either. He never touched me in Mom's presence, but he may as well have. Ron made highly sexualized comments about my body right in front of Mom. It became the new normal. Often, he left her bed and woke up in mine. She never said a word about either. April came quickly, and I assumed I was approximately 3 months pregnant. I didn't take any prenatal vitamins, and I didn't receive any medical care. I didn't tell anybody about the pregnancy, not even Sharon. How would I explain it? I couldn't. I didn't know what to do. I was a high school junior, pregnant by my mother's husband, and still holding on to the hope that Ken would want me when he figured it all out. I didn't think he would. Why would he? I kept the secret for as long as I could. But as Grandma always said, two things can't be hidden for long: a pregnancy and a drug habit. Mom and I were perfect examples of why that assertion held true. I woke up one Sunday morning and it was business as usual. Even though Ron was a knocked down, drag-out drunk and recovering drug addict, he hid it well enough to continue to preach. Every Sunday, Cassidy and I had to attend church to watch the devil do his work. Mom stopped going altogether, and she didn't make any excuses about it. No one asked any questions. The only positive note was the fact that Cassidy was getting older, and Ron no longer felt comfortable taking me to the shack after church. I hated that shack. It reminded me of how Ron had ruined my life, and it made me think of Ken. I still missed him, and I thought about him all the time. On that particular Sunday morning, I went into the kitchen to make breakfast. Everything fell right into place, even though I didn't see it that way at the time. It was as if it was life's intention to open my box on that day. And what came out of it set the stage for some monumental events to take place. Things wouldn't ever be the same after that day. That was a simultaneous blessing and a curse. I pulled the ingredients out of the refrigerator. I was all set to prepare sausages, eggs, and toast. We usually ate regular pork sausages. We had been eating the same kind for years, but for some reason, Mom had purchased sweet maple sausages from the grocery store. The smell of them immediately made me nauseous. I tried to fight it, but my urge to vomit was obviously more intense than my urge to keep the secret. Before I could restrain myself, I started vomiting into the kitchen sink. Mom came running out of her bedroom. "Londa, I know you ain't throwing up in my..." "Shelonda." I turned to face her, wiping my mouth with the sleeve of my robe. "Yes, ma'am." Mom's voice became extremely stern. "Shelonda, you pregnant?" I wanted to keep holding the secret, but I couldn't. I needed to get it out. I started crying. Without thinking about it, I blurted out that I was sorry. I really was sorry. I was sorry for the predicament that I was in. I was sorry that Mom had to find out in the way that she did. I was sorry for the obvious hurt that Mom was experiencing. There was no good way for the situation to have played out, and I was sorry. I'm not sure what I expected, but present day, the way it all played out is still incomprehensible to me, even after all these years. I saw a side of Mom that I hadn't ever seen before. She was an unwed teen mother, and it was obvious that she wasn't in the best of situations when I was conceived. One would assume that she would be a little more sensitive to the situation, even under the circumstances. But she wasn't sensitive. She was angry, extremely angry. Mom called me a whore and told me that the hardship that I created would be mine and mine alone. She accused me of seducing Ron. She told me that I would never have her husband and that I would raise my baby alone. Mom told me that she wished death upon me and everything that was connected to me. I saw the fury in her eyes, and I knew she hated me. There was no doubt in my mind. In all the years since, I've never forgotten the things she said to me or the way they made me feel. My mind goes back to that day on any occasion when it's obvious that someone wants to verbally hurt me. No mother should ever say those things to her child, regardless of the situation. As an adult, I somewhat understand Mom's pain and also her anger. She was getting older and less attractive. Her husband, whom she foolishly loved very deeply, was sexually attracted to her daughter. Additionally, she had faked a pregnancy to make him give her the attention that she had while she was pregnant with Cassidy. Not only had her plan been foiled, but her daughter had gotten pregnant by him instead. I understand every feeling that Mom experienced. Really, I do. But as a mother, she should have seen me as a victim, even though I didn't consider myself to be a victim at the time. I had stopped fighting Ron long before that point, so to some degree, I felt like a willing participant, but I wasn't. I was a child that was just trying to get by, and Mom should have been considerate of that fact, but she wasn't considerate. She didn't see me as a victim. She saw me as a competitor. There was no way that Mom would have allowed me to be pregnant in her house. She wouldn't have ever tolerated me getting attention from Ron while carrying his child. It's entirely possible that it wouldn't have gone that way. Ron was cruel to me. One couldn't just assume that a pregnancy would have altered his behavior. However, that's not a chance that Mom was willing to take. She told me to leave her house and not to ever return. I was faced with a difficult decision. Where would I go? Back to Grandma's? In truth, that was the only decision I had. Grandma would be disappointed, but she wouldn't turn me away. She wouldn't ever turn me away. I went into my bedroom to pack. Midway through, I looked at the clock. It was only 9:30. I knew Grandma was still in church, but waiting in that house certainly wasn't an option. I decided to call Sharon. If she was available, I knew I could sit with her until Grandma got out of church. I called and she was willing, just as I knew she would be. Sharon was always there when I needed her. I placed all of my belongings outside and came back to say my goodbyes to Cassidy. I hated the thought of leaving her there with them, but I didn't have a choice in the matter. Mom and Ron were in their bedroom arguing. Ron was trying to convince Mom that I should be allowed to stay in the house, but she wouldn't hear of it. I left before she could change her mind. I started crying the moment I saw Sharon. I was relieved to see her. Although it was under the worst of circumstances, my impromptu eviction served as an excellent opportunity to break away from my life. It also provided me with an opportunity to finally share the news with Sharon. Without giving the details of Ron's involvement, I explained to Sharon that Mom had evicted me after finding out that I was pregnant. I hated to introduce Sharon to my pregnancy in that way. There was so much that I had failed to tell her. The 20-minute ride was filled with my tearful account of how Mom spoke to me and my fear of going back to live with Grandma. Sharon let me release it all, and she didn't interrupt. By the time I finished my soliloquy, we had arrived at Sharon's apartment complex. She quietly led me inside. Sharon's apartment was cute and girly. It suited her perfectly. I sat on the couch to catch my breath. She brought me a glass of water and sat on the couch beside me. She had been quiet up to that point, but I guess she lost the ability to quell her vocalization. "Can I ask you a question?" she asked. Still crying, I shook my head to indicate that I was willing to answer her question. Sharon took a deep breath and delivered her question. "Londa, are you pregnant by Ron?" Though I was surprised by her lack of knowledge, I nodded yes and asked how she knew. Sharon took my hand and looked into my eyes as she answered. "Ron is my uncle. He got me pregnant when I was 14. My ears processed the words, but my mind couldn't comprehend the information. For some reason, I assumed that I was a victim of circumstance. I thought that Ron had taken a liking to me at a point when Mom became pregnant and was no longer appealing to him. But after hearing Sharon's admission, I was forced to acknowledge the fact that Ron was a predator, a fact that made me feel even guiltier about leaving Cassidy with him. I asked Sharon how it came to be that she had gotten impregnated by Ron. "We had sex," she said. She laughed. I laughed because she laughed, but we both knew that there was nothing funny about the situation. I learned that Sharon used to be me. Better yet, I was the new Sharon. Apparently, Ron had a sister that was down on her luck years prior. Because Ron was living in the family house, his sister, Sharon's mom, had come to live there while she was getting herself together. Initially, Ron's attention had been welcomed, as neither Sharon nor her sister had consistent relationships with their fathers. But after a while, Ron began to cross the line. Just as he had with me, Ron started touching Sharon when she was 12. Unlike with me, Ron had impregnated Sharon when she was 14. Sharon told her mom, who promised to handle the situation. Unfortunately, her mom's idea of handling it was sending Sharon off to a home for unwed teens and blackmailing Ron into giving her a lump sum of money. Sharon had no say in the matter and wasn't given any of the proceeds. She was told that the baby would be given to a good family and that they weren't to ever speak of the situation again. Sharon kept her promise, even to the point of being cordial to Ron at family gatherings. Sharon showed me a picture of her baby girl. She looked just like Cassidy. Everything started to make sense. I recalled my initial meeting with Sharon at the salon. It was obvious that Ron and Sharon knew each other, but I hadn't ever asked either about the nature of their relationship. Sharon told me that Ron had gone to the back with her and asked her not to mention their previous situation. He told her that he had changed, and he promised to bring me in every week and pay her extra for doing my hair. Needing the money, Sharon had agreed. That's why she was so inquisitive. She wanted to know if Ron was doing to me what he had done to her. I wish I had known. Hearing Sharon's story allowed me to take some of the blame away from myself. I wasn't too grown. I wasn't doing too much. Ron was a predator, doing what predators do. "Now you have a decision to make," said Sharon. I inquired about the nature of the decision. Sharon explained how hard it was to carry a baby and just hand it over to a complete stranger. She told me that even though her daughter looked just like Ron, she had suffered with depression after giving her away. I imagine it would have been equally painful if she had kept her. The baby would have been a constant reminder of the abuse that she had suffered. No one deserves that. Sharon asked if I had considered abortion. I hadn't. "I want you to be at your best," said Sharon. She asked me to consider how hard it would be to follow my dreams as a teen mom, especially without the family support that would be essential in that family situation. I had always been opposed to abortion. Additionally, I had no idea how much it would cost or how I would get the money. Sharon told me not to worry about that. She told me that if she hadn't learned anything from her mom, she'd learned that Ron would pay up when his back was against the wall. Sharon told me that she would take care of all of it. She also told me that I could stay with her instead of going back to Grandma's. I didn't feel comfortable living with Sharon with no income, so she told me that I could help out with washing and braiding at the salon. It was a perfect arrangement that worked out well for both of us. I loved living with Sharon. It gave me the opportunity to openly talk about things without the fear of judgment or retribution. And in working at the salon, I learned a skill that I could use forever. I had the abortion, and it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I no longer had the burden of the hardship that Ron had created for me. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Shenny Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in purchasing books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.